Please welcome visiting expert, United States Institute of Peace, Knox, Thames.
There are two types of laws, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, those that are just and those that are unjust. He continued, a just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law. An unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law. He further explained that any law that uplifts the human personality is just, and any law that degrades human personality is unjust. All segregation statutes are unjust because segregation distorts the soul and damages the personality. Were Dr. King alive today, I believe he would draw the same conclusion about laws that limit religious freedom and promote the persecution of individuals because of what they believe. Just laws should defend religious minorities, not persecute. Just laws should facilitate religious practice, not restrict it. Just laws should end discrimination, not enhance or advance it. Just laws must promote equal citizenship, not limit rights based on religion or belief. Today for this panel, we will discuss legal structures of persecution and religious discrimination. International law is clear that the obligation of governments that they hold is to protect the individual rights that each and every one of us hold. They are to protect the rights of people to pursue truth as their conscience leads. However, we know, and some of you know firsthand, that that is not the reality in too many countries around the world. From our panel, we'll hear about a range of limitations. Some examples that we'll hear about are laws that assault individuals for pursuing truth as their conscience leads in the form of blasphemy or apostasy laws. We'll hear about lawfare that attacks specific communities, criminalizing the basic tenets of their faith, such as Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan or Baha'is in Iran. We'll hear about the out-and-out war against religion perpetrated by the communist Chinese government against all faith, and the less visible but arguably more pernicious registration systems that create incredibly high, burdensome systems that make it impossible for communities to form and thus make their basic worship illegal. We all can agree that the law should defend the vulnerable and not oppress the innocent. So I'm very pleased to introduce this outstanding panel and the conversation we'll have today. First, we'll have Congressman Khanna, Democratic representative from California's 17th District. We'll have Amjad Khan, spokesman of the U.S. Ahmadiyya Muslim community and professor at UCLA. Bob Fu, the founder and president of China Aid. And John Marsh, chairman of the board for Barnabas Aid. So each of these panelists will share for about 4 minutes to give everyone an opportunity to share their views, and if time permits, we'll then have a discussion. So we'll start with Congressman Khanna. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the honor of having me and for your work in standing up for religious freedom, religious expression in the United States and around the world. The fundamental premise of America is a nation founded on religious freedom, religious expression, a plurality of religions. That's what was critical to the founding of our nation. A view from John Locke and after wars in Europe that we would recognize the plurality of religions and religious expression in our nation. I believe that liberalism must allow for religious expression. So to be truly liberal, you can't just have a view of public reason that excludes people's deep commitments to religious expression. We need to allow for religious expression within the public sphere in the United States. And I believe that the United States needs to stand very, very clearly for religious expression, religious freedom around the world. That means condemning unequivocally actions in Saudi Arabia where you've had the execution of Shiite Muslims, and raising that is a human rights violation. It means condemning very clearly nations that suppress expressions of Christian faith or persecute Christianity. It means condemning very clearly nations that discriminate against any particular religion or a person's deep convictions. We have to recognize that the diversity of religious thoughts and commitments actually makes us stronger. And let me sort of conclude my remarks with the person who I thought understood this the best, which is the great Frederick Douglass in Composite Nation. Frederick Douglass, of course, a deeply person of deep Christian faith, talks about how it would not be wise for any church not to have diversity of religious thoughts, because that actually strengthened his own faith, strengthened his own understanding of his own faith, to see the plurality of diverse faiths thrive in the United States. I think Douglass's central insight is a philosophical one, which is that the religious expression is not just honoring people's dignity, it's not just honoring people's deepest commitments, it's actually helping us get to a better understanding of our own worldviews and of truth by doing that. And that's why the United States must be committed to that here and around the world.
Great. Thank you, sir. Amjad.
Well, thank you. As a lawyer and a law professor, keenly aware of the power of law, for good and for bad. And as a religious freedom advocate, we see that the law has been increasingly used and weaponized to repress communities. And we're talking about legal structures of discrimination. And it's very important to analyze the legal question in order to avoid the worst atrocities later. For me, this is personal, because I see it in Pakistan as an Ahmadi Muslim, an issue that I've spent most of my life studying, researching, and advocating about. There are three structures of legal discrimination in this country. It begins with the Constitution. The Constitution of the country defines who is or is not a Muslim for purposes of the law, the only Muslim state to do that. And it declares the entire Ahmadiyya Muslim community to be non-Muslim by the stroke of a pen in 1974. Now that's amazing. We profess to be Muslim, but a country by its constitution says we can't. But that's not the end of it. The second structure of discrimination, and what follows from the Constitution, is the criminal legal apparatus. And in 1984, 5 blasphemy laws were promulgated, 2 that specifically target Ahmadi activities for posing as a Muslim. What this means is any act, any recitation of Arabic script, if I say salam, if I call a mosque as an Ahmadi, these are arrestable offenses. And 40% of all arrests are of Ahmadis. These blasphemy laws are repugnant to everything that we stand for as a nation, but it's not just the anti-Ahmadi laws. All persecuted communities suffer under these laws. But in Pakistan, it's much worse than that. It gets into the government machinery, discrimination at every level. To vote as an Ahmadi, we must disavow us being Muslim. We must say that the founder of our community is an imposter. We must say under penalty of perjury these things in order to vote. No one in this room would ever do such a thing, because it strikes at the core of freedom of conscience. Imagine if every Catholic or Mormon in America would have to say they're not Christian in order to vote. That is the reality for over 1 million Ahmadis with a 99% literacy rate, who can't vote in their own country as citizens of their country. They can't get their passports renewed. They have the word Ahmadi stamped on their passport, so they can't go and take the pilgrimage for Hajj. These are the discriminatory, this is the discriminatory apparatus that's the daily reality of an Ahmadi. But now, the last point I wish to mention is recently, the telecommunications arm of the country of Pakistan, the equivalent of the FCC, the PTA, has now extended the criminal laws to foreign citizens. 2 US citizens were served a notice a few months ago saying that the official website of the Ahmadi community is posing as Muslims, and that US citizens US citizens have to pay 500 million rupee fine and be subject to 3 years in jail with no content whatsoever associated with Pakistan. The extraterritorial application of these laws is dangerous. It affects all communities. So I sincerely believe here at the end that the way you deal with bad laws are good lawyers. And the legal movement is what will transform that particular situation. But it must come from those in this hall to understand that this beleaguered community is suffering from these structures. Then and only then can they be dismantled.
And I would add, one of the two amities who was charged is here on the stage. Amjad was been charged. So,
Yeah.
Bob.
I think the Dr. Martin Luther King would have not thought there is a third set of law, third kinds of law, that it looks like a just law on some of the letters of the law, but in the devils is in the detail, in their practice, especially in public square, in their execution of the law, is all evil. In the instance of the People's Republic of China, if you read the Chinese Constitution, Article 36, citizens of the People's Republic of China shall enjoy freedom of religious belief. Can you believe that? It's still there. But then there is an article down the road, under the Article 36, it said the state even shall protect normal religious activities. Mm-hmm. The word normal, that's the devil. Mm-hmm. And then it said, no one shall use religion to engage in activities that disrupt public order. A pastor friend of mine, Pastor Wang Yi from Early Rain Covenant Church, one sermon on the pulpit, just to cite John 3:16 of the New Testament, and Chinese president name said, please repent, you have a time for salvation. 9 years imprisonment. He was accused of subverting of state power. Then the next one is impair the health of citizens. If you are charismatic citizens, Christians, if you pray for the healing, that is called the evil cult. Impair the health of citizens, can sentence you 14, 15 years. And they interfere with the state education system. And today, millions of Chinese children, students, along with your students, teachers, even nurses, doctors, they are totally forbidden to have their faith, and both actually in private and in practice. So this is called the interference of education system. And millions of Chinese religious children were forced to sign a form to renounce their faith in the name of so-called sinicization. Means your faith has to be compatible with communism and socialism. The third one is religious groups. The Constitution said the religious groups and religious affairs should not be subject to control by foreign forces. That's on the Constitution. And according to that, 1 to 3 million predominantly ethnic Uyghurs, Kazakhs, are under the concentration camps because they are deemed as religious extremists, separatists, subverter with the foreign forces. And my good friend, Chinese-American pastor John Hall, was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment for what? Setting up 12 or 17 schools for 2,000 children for the Kachin minority children between China and the Burma border. So in China, we have seen now reach to the lowest, the worst level of legalized religious persecution right now. I think the solution is not only good lawyers, The good lawyers in China already arrested who defend those who are defenseless. That's the Communist Party's merciless thing. But also, really, I honestly think to hold those perpetrators accountable in the real way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you, Bob. On behalf of the founder of the Barnabas Organization and its international director, the Cor Episcopus, the very Reverend Dr. Patrick Sugdeo, we are very thankful for this opportunity to shed light on this really important topic of the legal structures. As I've said before, Dr. Sugdeo can't be here because of a legal structure, the COVID restrictions. But as chairman of the U.S. division of the Barnabas Organization, I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to present a perspective on this topic in which we've participated for a number of years. It's been said by others that crises provide opportunities that may not have previously existed. And it's really clear in today's world that today's world continues to experience an unprecedented number of crises. So what then are the opportunities that may be resounding from these crises that we face? American pastor Chuck Swindoll, in a recent message, framed it this way: we are all faced with a series of great opportunities, brilliantly disguised as impossible situations. So what then are the impossible situations that we're facing that may be disguising great opportunities? First, there are what appear to be very significant national laws, such as in Asia, South Asia, the Middle East, which prohibit, as we've heard, the free exercise of religion. We characterize these laws as blasphemy laws, laws pertaining to national security, and laws pertaining to the conversion of people from one religion to another. In many cases, such as the case with Asia Bibi, people are intimidated, arrested, jailed for extended period of times, and may ultimately receive punishments solely based on their desire for religious self-expression. These actions caused an Indian Christian organization to say recently the justice system has failed to defend the rights of persecuted Christians and other minority religions. Another impossible situation is caused by laws which support disinformation and hateful rhetoric, and those often are targeted against religious minorities. Campaigns of this type embolden intimidation, harassment, mob violence against various religious minorities. The recent report of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom said that the worst Hindu-Muslim mob violence in more than 3 decades left 50 people dead and 200 injured in February 2020. Similarly, as we have heard by Bob speak so eloquently, the laws in China restrict religious behaviors and underground church participation. An advanced surveillance state in China subjects people to a social credit system designed to coerce them to comply with behavior that the state deems reasonable and proper. Non-conforming churches are destroyed, and church leaders, as we have heard, are arrested and jailed. The U.S. IRF reported that China has increased its international pressure on religious freedom and human rights by intensifying the efforts of sinicization of religion in general, and specifically targeting Christian, Muslim, and Buddhist minorities within their country. Another situation is caused by the state-level anti-conversion laws in India, which serve the country's Hindu nationalist perspective and prohibit conversions to religions apart from the state-sponsored religion. About a third of India's 28 states limit or prohibit religious conversion to protect the dominant religion from perceived threats from religious minorities. Again, the USCIRF report. In addition to these infringements of religious freedom in Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East, the legislatures and the courts in Western nations have also been creating and enforcing laws which limit the freedom of religious practice. Our position in the Barnabas Organization has been to support and protect persecuted people and peoples, but feel free to critique the ideologies that bring those persecutions about. Forums such as this allow us to justly critique those ideologies and behind the legal structures which have fomented many of these crises of religious discrimination and persecution. But we do feel that these same legal structures can also be used to turn the crises around and provide a series of great opportunities for all people. Thank you.
Thank you. In the time we have remaining, I'll ask just a couple of brief questions. First, I want to go to Congressman Khanna. What would be your advice to us? You're an outspoken member of Congress on human rights, both at home and abroad. We've got a room full of advocates here from around the country and around the globe. What advice would you have for us about how we can work with people like you to give you the information you need, the support that you need to be that voice for human rights?
Well, I think you're doing it by showing up, by speaking out, and ultimately I think the advantage you have is you have a truth and human aspiration on your side. I mean, the aspiration to be able to worship a God of one's choosing, one's family's choosing, one's community's choosing is so deep in human nature, and I think comes before any state or government. It's the most sacred relationship a person has. And so when you stand up and say that people should have that freedom, that literally is the basis of the American experiment. And I mean, it goes back to John Locke. And so I think you're on such firm footing philosophically that having those conversations with members and insisting that our foreign policy prioritize those is very important. And you have traces of that across the world. I mean, Gandhi was a huge believer in religious pluralism. So I think you can draw from traditions in many different countries to support religious freedom of expression.
And turning to Amjad and Bob, we've got about 3 minutes left. What are your top 3 best practices for advocacy? What have you seen that works when you're engaging the State Department, members of Congress? What would you share? What are some good thoughts for us?
It's a very good question. I'll just say that, yesterday we saw it on display, when the persecuted advocate for the persecuted. So we are all good, and there's wonderful choruses in this room, people who are advocating for their own causes, and they should. But when you advocate for another community with that same passion, and then you build that coalition, that's the symphony. That sound is beautiful, and that's what we need in the halls of Congress. So I really think it's about coalition building, the people here advocating for each other. That's the best practice, and then concise points and something implementable. Sam Brownback talked about this, that sometimes you can only get 40% of the way. So try to get that 40%. Don't reach for 100% right away, and you'll see some incremental change maybe in 2 or 3 years. Those are 2 points that come to my mind.
Great. Bob?
Yeah, I think, I totally agree on the kind of, maybe we can call it unity, right? Or I borrowed a Communist Party term, but in a good way, called a united front. But it's a good united front. But because in the end, we are fellow human beings. Yes. That's why the summit motto is religious freedom for everyone, everywhere, all the time. So it's China Aid, we are a Christian organization. We have never hide our identity, but we help, any religious persecuted faithful. If we got requests and we just help them. We just recently rescued this Kazakh ethnic, Muslim family from Kazakhstan who left the labor camp to Kazakhstan, Turkey, to Midland, Texas. And so another one is really truth-telling. I mean, we should never tell lies or exaggeration for whatever cost. That's my 2 points.
Yeah. John?
I think probably one of the earlier panels had mentioned a thing, and I think Representative Khan said it very well, and that I think we are a civil society, and I think much of what can really be done positively is from the civil sector. It's opportunities like this for us to go from here, where we've been really blessed with the opportunity to see that interreaction of various faiths and to be supported and encouraged by it. And as we go back to be able to share that in the communities in which we reside, share it with the leaders in those communities, and pray for encouragement and change.
Well, please join me in thanking our panelists for their insights and the great discussion we had today.
Thank you.